Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of a lesson idea on linear regression in the context of a biology situation where we're looking at the relationship of head volume and brain mass. What we've done already in part 1 is to look at the data. Part 2 was about building the linear model, and part 3 now is about improving the visualization from a visual design standpoint. So the first thing I want to do is scroll back up here and show you, this is where we left off. And so this is our plot. This is the linear model in blue as a line through our data set. So this is just the base R graphics scatter plot. And what we want to do is make this look a lot better. So just to get inside my thoughts a little bit, some things that stand out to me that I don't like about this plot. The labels for the axes look really cryptic. They have this $sign, main. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. That is the name of the data set that I used, but it doesn't mean anything here. So that needs to be changed. There's some underscores. So let's just say part 1 would be relabeling these axes. Another thing, the numbers on each axis are kind of weird. They're spaced out quite far. There's some points that have no label. They don't exactly start at the beginning and end of these lines. So I might want to clean that up a little bit and sort of play with the spacing of that, the tick marks and the labels on those. The points, some people might like these circles. Some people might like to have circles that are filled in. Some people just like the dots. So I need to look at that. They're not bad right now, but I might change the color here a little bit. The line, it's okay, but I think I want something a little brighter. And another thing, the border around this image is not really necessary. So that's visually distracting. So I want to get rid of that too. I might also need to adjust the shape of this plot overall. But those are some initial thoughts. So let's look at this with the ggplot2 library. I spelled it wrong here too. So it's ggplot for grammar of graphics plot 2. Okay. So getting into this is the same plot with that library. So it's drastically different already, you can tell. One thing that stands out is the main reference is gone from the axis labels. The numbers appear to be quite similar, a little bit lighter, a little smaller, a little different font. One big change, though, is the background is now this light gray with these white grid lines, and the points are just solid black. So we have some changes to make ahead of us. Now, you might ask, why would you use a different library instead of the base R graphics? Well, you can make decent looking plots with base R graphics, but there's more control and a better overall look, in my opinion, with this particular library. So when we get into the idea of a reproducible report, you can make a style that is your own, and you can even save that style and then apply it to all of your plots as a theme. Now, we're not doing that in this case. I have another video about custom themes with ggplot2, so you can check that out. But in terms of reproducibility, that standardization is key. So this makes it a nice way to have a lot of control and a lot of standardization with a nice look. So the first thing I want to do here, this is what I do. I often will use this minimal theme just to start things off. So I'm taking that initial code for that graph, and then I'm adding this minimal theme. And the way that ggplot commands work is you have your data set, then you have some information in this aesthetics function, so where you tell it the X and the Y, and then you can add this geom point to make it a scatter plot. So then you sort of stack on additional commands with pluses. So here we add on the point, then we add on this theme. And what that does is it takes away that gray background. It makes the grid lines this very light gray color, and a lot of it's the same as it was before. But it gives it a little bit cleaner look to start off. So I think it's a good starting point. I want to remove those grid lines. So the next thing I do is I start adding in some information to this theme function, and I'm using this to adjust the panel.grid.major and .minor elements, I guess I can call it. and these will be set up as element underscore blank. So what this does is it takes away the grid lines. And so that adds a little bit more clarity and focus on these data points. So the grid lines are not completely necessary in this case, and so I want to get rid of them. There's no border like we had in the base R graphic, so I don't have to worry about that part. The next thing I want to do is adjust the axes. So I mentioned that the numbers were not quite set the way that I wanted them to be. So here I'm using scale X continuous and scale Y continuous to adjust the axes. Now these axes are continuous values. If you look at what types of data you have, these are continuous variables. So that's the appropriate one for that. Now you can set limits and breaks within this. So that tells it the range of numbers that you want, and then within that, how you want those broken up. So I'm using for the x-axis, which is the head volume, I looked at the minimum and maximum values within that just to get an idea. And so I'm setting them to 2700 as a min and 4500 as a max. And then I'm breaking them up by 200 each. So it should go 2700, 2900, right, and so on. And then for the y-axis, it's a little different. So after looking at the min and max values, I decided to set this to 800 and 1600, and then break that up by 200 also. So that's the new part here, and we can see that our numbers on the axes look a lot better. They start closer to the origin of this plot, and there's more information there. So that looks pretty good. The next thing I want to do is look at the axes, titles, and caption. So this involves adding a new block here called labs, and then adding some adjustments in our theme. So here we can see that within labs we have a title, a subtitle, X, Y, and caption. So that takes care of all of the text. And then as far as the formatting, you can put that into the theme here. So plot title, plot subtitle, axis text, and axis title all get different sizes. So you can play with that until you're happy. But this is what we end up with. So I added some text for the title and subtitle, and then I renamed the labels here for the axes, and then I added the data source in here as a caption. And that's automatically a lot smaller, and I think it's a nice place to put the information if you're drawing your data from a particular source. I also wanted to address the lack of units that were appearing. So here we have head volume, and it's listed as cubic centimeters. So here we have head volume, and it's listed as cubic centimeters, and we have brain mass in grams. So that adds a lot of clarity. The title is really helpful. The subtitle can add clarity as well, but now we're looking pretty good. At this point, I need to add the model in so we can see the line, and then make a few final adjustments. So for the model line, the way that you can do this is to use geom smooth, and then the method is LM, so that's a linear model. And then the standard error bands are false. You can have it true, but it adds a, and this is if you want it or need it or not, but it adds sort of a translucent band on either side of your line to show the standard error. And then you can set the color here as well. So I'm setting the color to sort of a bright orange, and I changed the color of the data to a dark gray. And I think that's the only change here. So let's take a look at that. So what this does is it reduces the data point intensity a little bit, and by using a high contrast, strong color for a model line, it really pops out. Now, this is where you need to make some decisions as sort of a visual editor. If you're part of a company that has a strong color branding, you may be interested in using that color if it looks good in this plot. You may need to consider the context of the plot itself. For example, if you're doing a map, you might want to show the water regions in blue and the land regions in green or brown or something. So this is where you can think a little bit about the visual style and the artistic side of things. But here, I just like this color. It's a nice strong pop, and it stands out really well against gray and white and black. So that's where we are now. And then the aspect ratio is one final thing that you can touch up. So this is the like squareness or rectangleness of your plot, and you may need to change it depending on the format of a report that you're producing, or maybe it just needs to look a little bit different. So in this case, we had a y-axis that was sort of stretched out a little bit. So here I'm going to compress that, and the change here just at the very bottom goes inside the theme group, and I'm setting the aspect ratio to 0.3. So that's less than 1. So if it's 1, you would have a square plot. Over 1, you would have like a taller rectangle. And if it's less than 1, you'll start to get a more flat rectangle. And so this is the final plot. It's a little bit squished down. I just noticed I didn't update the data source down here. It is Kaggle.com, but it also is that paper. So either way, check that. But the aspect ratio result is here. So we end up seeing a plot that's a little bit more squished. And I think it looks a little bit better because these numbers are about the same distance apart as these x-axis numbers. So that's it. That's how you can take your initial plot and add some styling updates to make it look good and get it ready for publication. Now inside of the code, you can do the ggsave command, or if you're in RStudio, you can even export your graph from there with like file save image as or something. So there's some ways to get it out of there. If you're using Quarto to make an online report like this, then users can just right click it and do a save image as and go from there if they need it. But you also have the benefit of this web published format. So thanks for staying tuned so far. If you've watched this far, make sure you hit that like button, give it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to the channel. Every little bit helps. So I appreciate it, and stay tuned until next time. Thanks.